She adopted an old dog no one wanted, then discovered his incredible, secret, heartwarming true story, the small town of Willow Creek was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business. But nobody talked about the scruffy old dog that had been sitting in the local shelter for over a year. His name was Rusty, a 12-year-old mutt with a patchy gray coat, cloudy eyes, and a limp that made him wobble. His cage was tucked in the back corner of the shelter, where the fluorescent lights flickered and the air smelled of antiseptic and wet fur. Visitors passed him by, drawn to the energetic puppies yipping for attention. Rusty didn't bark or wag his tail anymore. He just lay on his thin blanket, staring at the wall, as if he'd given up on the world. Emma Larson was no stranger to loss. At 34, she'd moved back to Willow Creek. After a messy divorce left her feeling like a hollowed-out version of herself. She rented a small cottage on the edge of town, where the quiet was both a comfort and a curse. Emma wasn't looking for a pet when she stopped by the shelter one rainy afternoon in October. She'd only gone to drop off a bag of old towels her neighbor had donated. But as she handed the bag to the shelter volunteer, her eyes caught a glimpse of Rusty's cage. "Why's he all the way back here?" Emma asked, peering at the old dog. The volunteer, a tired-looking woman named Clara, sighed. "Rusty's been here longer than most. He's too old, too sick. Nobody wants the vet bills or the heartbreak. We've lowered his adoption fee to nothing. But, well, you see how it is." Emma crouched by the cage. Rusty didn't move. But his eyes flicked toward her, dark and deep, like they held a story he couldn't tell. Something about that look tugged at her, a quiet ache she recognized. "What's wrong with him?" she asked. "Arthritis? Bad hips? Maybe some vision loss?" "He's not in pain, thanks to meds. But he's not exactly a spring chicken," Clara said. "He's gentle, though. Never bitten or growled. Just forgotten." Emma didn't know why she said it. Maybe it was the rain, or the way Rusty's eyes seemed to ask for nothing and everything at once. "I'll take him," she blurted. Clara raised an eyebrow, but Emma was already filling out the paperwork, her hands shaking slightly. She didn't have a dog bed, or food, or any idea what she was doing. But she knew she couldn't leave him there. The first few days were rough. Rusty barely ate, and his slow, wobbly walks around the backyard seemed more out of duty than joy. Emma spent hours Googling how to care for senior dogs, buying joint supplements and a plush orthopedic bed she could barely afford. She talked to him constantly, her voice filling the empty cottage. "You're gonna be okay, buddy," she'd say, stroking his patchy fur. "We're in this together." Rusty would sigh and lean into her hand, just a little, and it felt like a victory. One evening, while Emma was sorting through a box of old photos she'd been avoiding since the move, Rusty did something strange. He'd been lying by the couch, his usual spot, when he suddenly struggled to his feet and limped toward the back door. He let out a low, insistent whine, something Emma had never heard from him before. Thinking he needed to go out, she opened the door, but Rusty didn't move. Instead, he turned his head toward the corner of the yard where an old oak tree stood, its branches heavy with autumn leaves. He whined again, louder this time. "What is it, boy?" Emma asked, grabbing a flashlight. The yard was dark, the air crisp and damp. Rusty hobbled forward, his limp more pronounced, and stopped by the base of the oak. He pawed at the ground, his cloudy eyes fixed on a spot where the dirt looked freshly disturbed. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She knelt beside him, shining the flashlight. The soil was loose, like someone had dug there recently. Rusty kept pawing, his movements urgent. Okay, Emma said, her voice trembling. She grabbed a garden trowel from the shed and started digging. Rusty watched, his breath coming in short huffs. About a foot down, the trowel hit something hard. Emma brushed away the dirt, revealing a small metal box, rusted at the edges. Her hands shook as she pried it open. Inside was a collection of treasures, A silver locket, a bundle of yellowed letters tied with string, a child's drawing of a dog that looked eerily like Rusty, and a faded photograph of an old man with kind eyes holding a puppy. The puppy had the same patchy gray fur, the same soulful stare. Emma's breath caught. "Rusty," she whispered, "what is this?" The letters were addressed to a woman named Margaret, written by someone named Henry. They were love letters, spanning decades, filled with promises and memories. The last one, dated 10 years ago, was different. It mentioned Rusty, who was just a pup then, and a wish to bury their story under the oak tree where they'd first met. "If you find this, Maggie," it read, "know that Rusty brought you to me one last time." Emma's mind raced. She didn't know any Margaret or Henry, but the address on the letters matched her cottage. The next day, she took the box to the town library, where the librarian, an elderly woman named Doris, gasped at the sight of the locket. "That's Margaret Thompson's," she said. "She lived in your cottage years ago." Sweet woman, but she passed away not long after her husband, Henry. They never had kids, just their dog. I heard he ended up in a shelter after Margaret died. Emma felt a chill. Was the dog named Rusty? Doris frowned, thinking, could have been. I don't rightly recall. But Henry loved that dog like family, said he was special, like he understood things most dogs don't. Over the next week, Emma pieced together the story. Henry and Margaret had been childhood sweethearts, their love rooted in Willow Creek. The oak tree was their meeting place, where they'd carved their initials long ago. Rusty, it seemed, had been their last companion, a dog they'd rescued as a puppy. When Margaret died, Rusty was sent to a shelter far away, only to end up back in Willow Creek years later, old and unwanted. Somehow, he'd found his way back to the cottage, back to the tree. Emma couldn't explain it, but she felt like Rusty had been waiting for her, like he'd known she'd find the box. She had the locket cleaned and wore it sometimes, a reminder of the love it carried. The letters she donated to the town museum, where they became a quiet legend among the locals. Rusty's drawing, though, she kept on her fridge, right where she could see it every day. Rusty changed after that night. He started eating more, wagging his tail when Emma came home. His limp was still there, but he seemed lighter, like a weight had lifted. Emma changed too. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since her marriage fell apart. She joined a book club, made a few friends. The cottage didn't feel so empty anymore. One sunny afternoon, Emma sat under the oak tree with Rusty curled up beside her. She traced the faded initials in the bar cage, and a man smiled. "You knew, didn't you?" she said softly. Rusty's tail thumped against the grass, and his eyes met hers, bright despite their cloudiness. For the first time, Emma felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The video ends with a slow pan across the yard, the oak tree glowing in the golden light of sunset. Emma's voiceover says, "Rusty didn't just find a home. He brought me back to mine." And in his quiet way, he reminded me that real love never really leaves. It just waits for the right moment to be found.